There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown.
For generations, there have been tales of enormous humans which captured the imagination of explorers, archaeologists, and local communities across North America. From Native American legends to early 20th century excavation reports, accounts of giants, some weigh over 8 feet tall, have persisted.
The remains of 3 skeletons were found whose size would indicate they measured in life at least 8 feet in height. The remarkable feature of these remains was they had double teeth in front, as well as in back of the mouth and in both upper and lower jaws. Upon exposure to the atmosphere, the skeletons crumbled back to Mother Earth.
Now, recent discoveries in California have brought new attention to these lost giants, revealing skeletal remains and artifacts that hint at a mysterious chapter of America's past.
Farmer Warren Cowan recently discovered several ancient graves a mile from the famous Serpent Mound, where Professor Putnam of Harvard made interesting discoveries. Upon opening one of the graves, a skeleton of upwards of 6 feet was brought to light. In another grave was the skeleton of a man equally large. It seems that the region was populated by a fairly intelligent people, and that the Serpent Mound was an object of worship.
The body of a man more gigantic than any ever recorded in human history has been found in the Miami Valley in Ohio. The skeleton, it is calculated, must have belonged to a man 8 feet 1.5 inches in height. It was found within a half mile of Miamisburg, in a location which contains many relics of the mound builders. Edward Gebhardt and Edward Kaufman discovered it while they were working in a gravel pit. Professor Thomas Wilson, curator of prehistoric anthropology, Smithsonian Institute, says of the find,
"The authenticity of this skull is beyond any doubt. Its antiquity is unquestionably great, though it is impossible to have a good guess as to its age. To my own personal knowledge, several such crania were discovered in the Hopewell group of mounds in Ohio."
Lovelock Cave Giants in Nevada. Lovelock Cave in northern Nevada has always been an important point for interesting archaeological finds and Native American history. But you won't believe that giants were spotted there too. Nestled near the edge of the Humboldt Sink, the site attracted widespread attention in the early 20th century when miners found something that would change what we know about the human race forever. Official excavations were carried out in 1912 and again in 1924. And during that time, the archaeologists recovered up to 10,000 artifacts spanning thousands of years of occupation by ancient peoples. At first, it seemed like normal findings of those who walked the road before. They found baskets, hunting tools, woven nets, and ceremonial items that allowed them to understand the lives of those who lived there before the Europeans. With radiocarbon dating of the materials in the cave, they discovered that there was human activity in that area as far back as around 2030 BC. But as they continued to dig in, they found some shocking discoveries that pointed to the lost giants of America. At first, they found unusually large sandals, which were about 15 inches in length. If worn by humans, it would mean a men's size 29 shoe. As they dug, they also found a massive handprint that was etched into a cave rock. That print was definitely not one of an average adult. The scientists revealed their findings in local newspapers, and many experts started to suspect that giants once lived in that region. The indigenous northern Paiute people, whose oral traditions cover the history of that area, tell of a group known as the Si-Te-Ka, which are red-haired and formidable warriors. According to the tribes, the Paiute and allied groups clashed with these opponents in a conflict that caused the Si-Te-Ka to retreat into Lovelock Cave. Then, the cave's entrance was closed, and fires set, sealing the fate of those inside. In 1931, reports emerged from the dry lake bed near Lovelock of 2 mummified remains measuring about 8.5 and 10 feet in length, with remnants of reddish hair. These ancient giants might have had red hair along with their strange heights, But it's not only in Nevada that the lost giants of America were spotted. Across California, some shocking sightings of giants and their remains were found, with some of them dating back to 1895, eerily not so long ago. Giant discoveries across California. A series of intriguing skeletal discoveries were made in the 19th and early 20th century in California, and it quickly captured public attention and provoked widespread interest in the idea of very large ancient human remains. One of the earliest sightings was in 1895 in the San Diego area, where historical reports described an enormously tall skeleton measured at 8 feet and 4 inches. The giant remains were measured by Professor Thomas Wilson, who was a curator of prehistoric anthropology, along with other experts of the area. The remains were acquired by a national institution for further study. Further out in Southern California, the Channel Islands, known as a group of islands off the coast, became a hotspot for giant discoveries between 1919 and 1930. Amateur archaeologist Ralph Glidden, who was sponsored by the museum, conducted extensive excavations on Santa Catalina Island and neighboring isles. During this time, Glidden actually unearthed thousands of human skeletons, and you won't believe how tall they were. The male individuals were standing well over 7 feet tall, and the largest skeleton was actually 9 feet 2 inches in length. That's more than enough proof about the lost giants of America. Glidden also found some eerie findings about the nature of those people. There was a very large funeral urn containing the remains of a young woman of very high status, surrounded by numerous others. Beneath it, there were skeletal remains of a notably tall male individual. These excavations didn't only reveal extraordinarily tall human bones, but also thousands of associated artifacts, including domestic items and burial goods. But not only in Catalina. There were reports from Santa Rosa Island and San Nicolas Island which described skeletal remains that were unusually tall. Some of these skeletons had terrifying features, like double rows of teeth. This was a trait from remains found in island burial grounds. Giant skeleton finds in the Midwest. When investigating the lost giants of America, you can't ignore the reports of oversized human skeletons in the Midwest, many of which came up in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, causing curiosity and debate among scientists and residents. One of the most shocking sightings came from Steelville, Missouri, where a June 11, 1922 report in the Steelville Ledger described how a young boy was searching for arrowheads and uncovered the complete skeleton of an individual. The discovery became even more surprising when they measured the skeleton and found out that he was about 8 feet tall. The remains were brought to Dr. R.C. Parker, who had the skeleton laid out in a hallway of his office, attracting attention from visitors intrigued by its exceptional size. Photographs showed a 6-foot-tall local man lying near to the skeleton for scale, and it revealed a dramatic difference in the stature. The skeleton was later packed for shipment to an institution for further investigations and study. Further north in Ohio, burial mounds built by ancient indigenous cultures continued to be important points for discussions of unusually large skeletal remains. Near Miamisburg, close to the large Miamisburg Mound, a conical burial mound attributed to the Adena culture dated from around 800 BC to 100 AD, historical reports from the late 1890s have revealed strange findings. An 1899 article in the Middletown Signal actually revealed that scientists had discovered a skeleton which actually belonged to a man 8 feet 1.5 inches tall in Miami Valley, along with other bones from other people of strange and unusual size. Giant stories in religious texts. Across major religious traditions, ancient texts and scriptures contain numerous references to beings described as giants or extraordinary figures. In the Hebrew Bible, the book of Genesis refers to a group called the Nephilim, a term traditionally translated as giants in some early versions, which appeared in the world before and after the Great Flood. These figures are mentioned along with descriptions of the Anakim and Rephaim, peoples of exceptional size and strength encountered by the Israelites during their entry into Canaan. In the Book of Numbers, spies report seeing the Nephilim in the land of Canaan, saying that they seemed like grasshoppers before them, and this revealed their imposing stature and reputation. Ancient Jewish and related traditions elaborated on these biblical mentions in texts outside the canonical Bible. The Book of Giants is an apocryphal work whose fragments were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. It expands on the Genesis narrative by depicting how these giant beings came into existence through unions between celestial watchers or fallen angels and human women. The text, preserved in Aramaic and Manichaean versions, actually talks about the origins of giants, their experiences, and dreams of coming judgment, and then connects them to the larger story of divine intervention before the flood. Another Jewish text that isn't included in most biblical canons is the Book of Enoch, which is an influential yet important piece of literature about giants. It describes the offspring of the Watchers, often identified with Nephilim, as mighty beings who contributed to widespread corruption and prompted heavenly judgment. These giants weren't just figures of size, but were powerful actors whose deeds attracted divine attention and even led to a moral and cosmic upheaval in early human history. The stories about giants also came in ancient Sumerian mythology, with strange records that scientists have been paying attention to. Ancient Sumerian mythology. Ancient Sumerian mythology, one of humanity's earliest written traditions, features a complex pantheon of gods known as the Anunnaki. In the Sumerian belief system, these figures were divine beings closely related to the sky, earth, and the underworld. The term Anunnaki itself likely derives from the name of the sky god Anu and can be interpreted as offspring of the princely blood within the pantheon of Mesopotamian gods. Texts from the region depict them as powerful deities who played important roles in shaping human destiny and cosmic order. In narratives such as Enki and the World Order and the Enuma Elish, the Anunnaki determined the fates of humans and intervened in important world affairs. They appear in multiple stories from Sumerian, Akkadian, and later Babylonian traditions, sometimes connected to celestial authority, and at other times with the judgment of souls in the underworld. Their number and specific duties varied across texts, but they often identify gods like Enlil, Ea, Sin, Shamash, and Inanna. But when it comes to the giants in these myths, especially in modern literature and popular media, the Anunnaki narrative says that these giants were advanced beings descending from the sky or distant realms. Their theories are portrayed as architects of early human civilization and attribute them to ancient knowledge or technological prowess. These retellings often weave in references to a supposed celestial home, sometimes called Nibiru, where the giants might have come from. There has been a lot of evidence about giants over the years in California, Nevada, and even in the Midwest, but something strange has been happening. Whenever the evidence lands in the Smithsonian institutions, it seems to just disappear. Evidence disappears from Smithsonian institutions. For over a century, the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., has been at the center of discussions about the fate of human skeletal remains collected from archaeological sites across the United States. The institution's museums and research centers actually have one of the largest collections of bones and objects from the 19th and 20th centuries, including many that were recovered from ancient burial mounds and other excavation sites. The remains were cataloged and used for research in anthropology, archaeology, and museum exhibits, as part of the Smithsonian's mission to preserve and interpret human history. In modern times, the Smithsonian has implemented formal repatriation policies under laws such as the National Museum of the American Indian Act, and has worked to return ancestral remains and funerary objects to lineal descendants and affiliated tribes. These legal frameworks require the institution to identify Native American human remains and cultural items in its collections and, upon request, facilitate their return to federally recognized tribes, a process that continues to evolve and can take many years to complete. But something mysterious is happening in the institution. Some of the unusually large bones that probably belong to giants were sent to the Smithsonian, but they have disappeared. They were assimilated into broader museum holdings over time, recatalogued under more normal collections, and included in inventories without being displayed. Many are wondering where these bones went. Are they being hidden in an effort to cover up the existence of giants? Or is it simply because there are too many items in the institution? Well, many of these giant remains are lost in public records and exhibits, never seeing the light of day. Meanwhile, there have been other controversial claims about giants and strange artifacts. Controversial archaeology claims of giants. There have been controversial finds which sparked debate about human history and ancient civilization, especially those that challenge established timelines or depict unusual beings. One of the most shocking examples is the Acambaro figurines from Guanajuato, Mexico. In 1944, Waldemar Julsrud reported unearthing a collection of more than 33,000 ceramic figurines near the town of Acambaro. Among the small clay pieces were depictions of humans alongside animals resembling extinct species such as dinosaurs, leading to questions about whether humans and prehistoric fauna. These figures might represent hybrid creatures or scenes that we typically can't find in normal archaeological records. All the objects, especially the thousands of figurines, have attracted the attention of enthusiasts and professional researchers. Exhibits featuring select pieces from the collection were mounted in the 1950s and 1960s, and the artifacts even became the subject of ongoing discussion among scholars interested in Mesopotamian and Mesoamerican parallels. Although the figurines themselves are now housed in museums in Mexico, their presence continues to provoke questions about the range of ancient symbolic expression and cultural storytelling embedded in clay figures. Many of these artifacts have raised eyebrows, especially the out-of-place finds and objects which defy conventional chronology or cultural associations. The Acambaro figures are debated artifacts that show advanced ancient technologies or unfamiliar animal forms, and the oversized human skeletal remains are proof enough that something massive walked the earth. But some experts say that giants might not have actually existed. Gigantism and square-cube law. The arguments against the existence of giants look at gigantism and the square-cube law, which helps to understand the physical limits on how large terrestrial animals, including humans, can grow. Gigantism in medicine refers to excessive height growth due to an overproduction of growth hormone during childhood or adolescence, usually caused by a benign tumor on the pituitary gland. People with this condition usually become as tall as 8 feet 11 inches, but such cases are rare and come with significant health challenges related to bone, joint, and cardiovascular stress. Underlying the broader question of size limits is the square-cube law, a mathematical principle first noted by Galileo Galilei that describes how an object's surface area increases by the square of a scaling factor, while its volume and therefore its mass increases by the cube of that factor as size increases. For living organisms, this has significant biological effects. As an animal becomes larger, its weight linked to volume grows much faster than the cross-sectional area of its bones and muscles, which dictates structural strength. In practical terms, this means that if a human's linear dimensions were increased significantly, the mass of the body would grow more rapidly than the strength of supportive tissues. A bone's cross-sectional area increases with size squared, while body mass increases with size cubed, leading to disproportionately heavier loads on bones and muscles. As a result, without fundamental changes to physiology or skeletal structure, increased body size imposes greater stress on joints and connective tissues. Looking at the existence of giants under this law, if a person's body and bones grow, all their other organs and systems must also scale up. Its respiratory and circulatory systems must support a much greater volume of tissue, and more. Still, mainstream science holds that there isn't credible physical evidence for a race or species of giants in human history, only unusually tall humans that were way bigger than modern humans. Some say that it might mean there were much bigger humans than before, and not exactly giants. All the evidence of lost giants in America continues to pile up, especially with the unusually large skeletal remains found in California. Do you believe in the existence of giants in the ancient world, or even today? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. So, thanks for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.